So how are you? All good with you, yeah?
Yeah, great, thank you.
Oh, that's good. That's good. I meant to say to you, I was doing all these podcasts, months and months ago. I had Tim Free Screen on, and I had Phil Brown on, and because I was doing the podcast, I'd get like recommendations when I'd be getting these analytics, and your stuff came up, the
Uh-huh.
Hell by Tree stuff. So that's when I started listening to it, I had meant to get you. I'd meant to contact you then, I just totally forgot about it. And then it came up the other day and I was like, oh shit, man, I must get on to that guy. So so I very much liked it, I have to say.
Great. Now are you we did we connect on Twitter first?
Email.
E-
I'm
just
not
because
on I'm not on
there's been a
Twitter.
few guys from Ireland that I've connected with recently,
Oh.
in different on different socials. So
Oh no, I'm not on Twitter. The hellhole that is Twitter. I thought I'd probably get off that.
I still quite like it. I don't
Yeah.
notice any difference.
Maybe it's just me. I think for me too much news affects me badly. I'm like, no, 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 no.
Yeah.
That's not good for the brain. But we'll get into the old record. Uh, how did the idea for it come about?
So first lockdown in March, April 2020. Um, I had relocated a bunch of my recording equipment from my studio back to my house, and I was, I guess, I was in a very different headspace to the usual sort of busyness and buzz of everyday life,
Yeah,
um, because everything had become sort of quieter, and I just remember being kind of enchanted by that spring. Everything felt new somehow. Um, Everything smelt amazing, and the sun was really bright. Maybe I'm just kind of looking back with really rose tinted glasses now because it was such a special time. And I understand that lots of people were suffering. And so I don't want to pretend that the whole thing was kind of somehow heaven because it was traumatic as well to
there's
be going
always
through a
there's always
pandemic.
those dichotomies in life, isn't there? For someone
Mm,
suffering, there's someone not suffering.
yeah, yeah. And I had just been noodling around on my MIDI keyboard, really, um, and my I had my Telecaster going straight into uh, my sound card thing, no amp or anything like that, just straight in.
Hmm.
I think I was using one of those Logic amp emulating
Okay.
plugins.
Okay.
And so started to kind of come up with some chord progressions and some vibes. And I did In the Trees and Rain After Sun on the first day. On the second day, I did Mysterium and I can't remember if it was on the second day or the third day, I came up with another piece which didn't end up being developed. But I essentially had these demos that I felt like, ooh, I'm really leaning into my love of talk here. And I do. I love Color of Spring. I love Spirit of Eden. But I think actually my favorite two would be Laughing Stock and then Mark's solo record.
Right.
And that spaciousness and that incidental kind of feeling to some of the notes where you just get the sense that that's the first time that they're being played.
Hmm.
And it all kind of added up to this four track demo, I guess, that I sent to a couple of people that I knew loved Talk Talk. My friend James Lewis uh, was the first to hear them. And he said, this is really good. I also sent them to Tim Rennick, who I'd just done an ambient track with. And he's best known as the touring guitarist with Pink Floyd. But I got to connect with him a few years ago and made an ambient track based on the Dawn chorus. And I sent it to him saying, are you at all into the late Talk stuff? And he said, well, I'm not. It's not really my thing, but my friend Phil Brown engineered all of that. And so he introduced me to Phil. Then I sent those demos to Phil, and he heard them, and he said, "You're really onto something."
Wow,
with
that's good.
This is the kind of the closest I've heard to that vibe. Which I know he's worked with lots of bands that came to him because he was involved with Talk. So I know that he's had, lots of people inspired by that work coming to him. So to hear that from him was like a real shot in the arm of encouragement. It just felt like, wow, okay, if he thinks I'm onto something, then maybe I am. And he introduced me then to Martin Ditchin, who played percussion on the Talk stuff and drums and percussion on Mark's solo record. And I also knew of Martin as Chris Rea's drummer.
Right.
And I love Chris Rea too. I really do.
Does he live in Brazil? Does he live in Brazil?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay,
so
right.
Martin's in Brazil now, and he just moved over there, or he's just in the process of moving. But I said, would you maybe even think about playing on these if I took them forward and fleshed them out a bit more?
Yeah.
And he said, yeah. And that's when I kind of, my brain sort of exploded, because I thought, to actually have somebody who worked with Talk and played on those records, play on my music, would just be outrageous. But then I thought, well, hang on, I'm only 1 degree of separation away from Robbie McIntosh, because he's local. He uses the same studio that I've used just up the road. And I wonder if I could reach out to Robbie. I'd already met him, actually. I'd met him in the local music shop, and we had talked about Talk and Hollis. And this was about 10 years ago. And he'd said, oh yeah, Mark, yeah, I think all he does now is play golf.
I know. Did you read that book from Ben Wardle? He was telling.
No, I haven't read it.
Fascinating. Like the golf talk. I was like, when I got to that, I was like, Mark Hollis is playing golf.
Yeah.
Strange.
Well, Lawrence. So then I found Lawrence Pendress,
the teacher guy. He was a teacher, wasn't he? In school or something?
That's right.
With Mark?
So he taught Mark's boys at school. And Mark loved his playing and asked him to play on the solo record. And then they became really good friends and would play golf together. So then I decided, okay, I'm going to ask as many as I can find that played on those records to play on this.
Okay.
And so I did. I just went crazy and asked anyone I could find. And I found Lawrence and I found Andy Panay on Facebook.
Right.
And those two guys worked on the solo record. I found Robbie I did connect with through Steve up at the studio, and he heard the demos and agreed to play. Then Simon Edwards I found online, I think through his website, who played bass. When Paul Webb left, he played bass on Laughing Stock and a solo record, I think. Who else? Yeah, Martin obviously already said yes. So at that point I had 5 musicians, and then Phil agreed he would mix it, and then Dennis Blackham, who mastered all of that stuff, agreed to master it. So that brought the contributors, the Hollis Talk guys, to 7.
Right.
And then I got introduced to James Marsh, who did all their cover art.
Yeah, I know James for
Uh,
years.
yeah.
Yeah, he does all my art for my for my work for like
Oh, brilliant.
maybe 12, 13 years, I'd say.
Yeah. I love his artwork,
It's
but
amazing.
part of me was like, if I go with a James Marsh front cover,
Yeah, might be overkill.
overkill,
Yeah.
and I've got to be really careful here because uh, whilst it's exciting to bring together all of these alumni,
Yeah.
I'm not Mark Hollis.
Yeah.
We are not Talk Talk.
Yeah.
And not only that, but this music is so revered by so many people. If I don't walk very carefully,
Mm, mm.
I am going to get into trouble with the fan base and with myself as a fan, actually, because what I didn't want to do was kind of make a pastiche, a Talk Talk
Yeah.
pastiche record that just sounded like second rate Talk Talk.
Yeah. And there's a lot of
So I
that.
had to try
There's a
and
lot of
find
that
a
out there.
balance
Yeah.
between involving these guys, but also being true to other influences that are dear to my heart. Probably the biggest of which on the music for this album has been Pink Floyd. Um, and then people like Ryoshi Sakamoto um, and Sky and kind of even some of like Graham Coxon and Blur and stuff. That's all in there too. Van Morrison. It's all in that mix of influences. And
Right.
so I had to. When it came to James Marsh, I said maybe you could design some sort of a logo for us. So he did. He came up with the motif with the little bird with a twig in
Ah,
his mouth
okay.
as a note, and he's sat on a tree. So it's really nice to have that visual link.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But we worked with a local artist called Nicholas Stockley to do the front cover, and that's gone down really well. And I think we also, I thought about asking Mark Felton to play harmonica on it because we were in touch on Facebook and stuff. But then I thought, again, that's just too close to the
Yeah.
bone.
Yeah.
Be too obvious to get him to do a distorted harmonica. It's just going to be too obvious. So yeah, leave that one. Um, but other than that, I feel like we, because we involved people like Eric Bibb and David Knopfler, founding member of Dire Straits, Tim from who played with Floyd and Bowie and Elton John, Eric Clapton, um, Mike Smith, who's in all the stuff that Damon Albarn does, Gorillaz, Blur, solo uh, on sax. He came and played. Gary Aylesbrook, who's a bit of a jazz trumpet virtuoso.
Wow.
There's musicians on there that have got absolutely nothing to do with Talk Talk.
Hmm.
So it's a real kind of mix.
And did you like when you were doing them in the studio? Was most obviously uh not in Brazil? I'm sure that was recorded remotely. But I mean, the other guys, are you in the studio with them, or was there a lot of remotely recordings done?
Nearly all of it was remotely recorded.
Really?
Yeah, I was in the studio with Lawrence doing the piano. I was in the studio with the string section. I was in the studio with Ben Taylor, who played a bunch of the double bass, and I tracked baritone guitar, piano, some electric guitar in the studio. But actually, the very first demo stage guitars remain on Rain After Sun and In the Trees and Mysterium, because I was really trying to stick to that ethic that Mark spoke about, where the first time something's played, it's at its
Yeah.
finest, and every time after that, it's never going to be quite as magical.
Yeah.
So I tried to stick to that ethic of, well, the magic is in that first take. But no, most of it was recorded. So bits were recorded like Eric recorded in Sweden, Justin recorded in Holland, my friend Chris Mears recorded in Kentucky.
Wow.
The drums were recorded in Brazil. Uh, 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 there's just there's stuff from all over the world in there, and I love that.
Yeah, that's
And
cool,
even
man.
Robbie, actually, at the time, because of lockdown, he recorded his parts at home, even though he's not far away. He's only a 40-minute drive away. But no, he at that point he was shielding and and at home. So yeah, most of it was done remotely.
Right. Wow. That's cool. It's amazing what you can do. Like it's just it's crazy. Like it's what you can do. Like I recorded an orchestra a few years ago online and there you just I had the live feed and the and you know an audio of it and then they just had my scores and you're like looking at them going, "Oh, change that part, make that." It's crazy. You could never do that years ago. Like you could never do
No,
it. I know for everything something we gain, we kind of lose something. Because like a lot
yeah,
of those records we'll say in the 60s and stuff, it's just amazing. Got like especially Beach Boy stuff where they're all in the room and they're all playing
yeah.
together. It has that vibe, doesn't it?
Well, we've just recorded our next thing at Real World
Oh,
Studios
whoa, what
all
was that
together,
like? Holy
playing
shit.
live together. So it couldn't be more different from Solace.
Wow.
So we're working, playing live in the room. So it's 100% the opposite end of the scale.
Was Peter Gabriel there?
He was, and we hung out.
Wow, that's cool,
Yeah,
bro. What was he like?
he's so nice. He's like
That's
super
good.
zen.
That's good.
He's really unassuming, and I just it was such a big deal for me to meet him because I was raised on his music and Genesis, and Dire Straits, and Chris Rea and that sort of 80s rock that my parents were into. But Peter's music has sort of it's been there with me in my life at some pretty big moments.
Right.
Like my I got to tell him that last year my grandpa died, and I was at his side when he died. And an hour later, I sat and I listened to his song "I Grieve," and it's got this line in it, which is, "It was only 1 hour ago. Things were so different then." And I made a point of listening to it exactly an hour after Grandpa died. And I got to tell him this, and he said, "You know, I wrote that song because there wasn't a song like it for those moments."
Right.
And I got to tell him what it meant to me, and that was just really special. And we got to chat about various lyrics that have gone straight into my heart, you know, that he wrote, and to work in that space as well. I mean, I'm a big 1975 fan,
Right.
and they made their recent album there earlier
Okay.
this year. Um,
What's the sound like
and
in the room?
it's a lovely open big sound. Um, it's not massively live.
Okay.
It's not snappy. It's quite warm,
Okay.
but they can move various bits of the ceiling, and things come out from here, and
That's cool.
it's like it's like a cathedral dedicated to sound. You know, it's
Yeah.
quite a big. Thankfully we were in the big room, which has got sort of 3 or 4 smaller rooms like booths coming off of it, and then a big sort of Star Trek kind of mixing desk that goes sort of around like this in a horseshoe with all the outboard.
Yeah.
Not crazy amounts of outboard at
Really?
all. No,
So it's
like
mostly the SSL is probably doing. It's an
the
SSL there,
SSL.
yeah. So
Yeah,
that's mostly doing the heavy lifting of the EQ and the compressors.
yeah. They had some nice '60s compressors and pull tech stuff. I
Sweet,
think.
man.
Yeah, it was nice, but it wasn't. You know, when you see like pictures of Ocean Way and
Yeah, they're
places like
just
that, which is
racks
just
full of.
yeah, just the walls are just racks.
Yeah, yeah.
It's nothing like that at all. It's quite
Wow.
minimal actually in terms of
Wow.
outboard, but amazing. The whole setup there is like it's very family. oriented. So there's a chef, there's a housekeeper, and they've all worked there for years and years, and they're all like a family, and it's just a beautiful vibe.
Wow, that'd be cool. Is this for a new album or just stuff you're working on?
No, it's actually we actually still can't believe it. We tracked 11 songs
Wow.
live,
Wow.
so there'll be two, basically two EP length releases coming out from that. But I don't know when this will go out, but I think we're going to announce it properly once the artwork's ready and we can put pre-orders up sometime early in 2023.
Okay.
But it should be out sometime summer next year.
Okay. So
But it's
so
all live. It's like it's live and there's new stuff and there's yeah.
okay. So like the is the project you because it started off as you or has it morphed into like you and the other guys?
I would say it's somewhere between. So we did our first live dates in October, and we've been rehearsing as a six-piece band since January.
Okay.
So that's four of us that played on Solace, three of whom are Mark Hollis Talk Talk veterans. So Robbie, Lawrence, and Andy, um, and then myself, who all played on Solace, and then we've got James and Paul. James plays bass. He's been with me for years in various bands. It's like my best mate, you know. And then Paul, who Robbie's worked with for many, many years. They've done lots of projects together. Paul's played for the Water Boys, Andy Fairweather Low. He's a brilliant drummer, and he really loves that Lee Harris
Yeah, yeah.
minimal drumming thing. But he's just got so much feel. I love it. So we went out and did 3 gigs end of October, which went really well. And we went straight from that the next week into Real World and tracked basically the set, the live set. And then looking forward, I'm absolutely sure that I'll work with those guys, but I still want to augment recordings with other musicians. I've got collaborations already sort of in the bag with people from Bark Psychosis, people from Swans. Um, I'm talking to some guys who work with My Bloody Valentine.
Wow.
So we'll see. But I'm writing again. I'm talking to you from a room that I'm setting up at home for writing, and it's me, but it's also a collective. It's like a community, and within that, there's a core that are in the live band, and then there's sort of people like Eric Bibb that we're looking to maybe get together and write, and there's people that didn't play on the first record that might play on the next one, and there's
Right. Right. I get
people
you.
that might come back and play again. You know, it's like
Okay.
let's just see.
Okay. I think Trent Reznor does something similar with Nine Inch Nails. It's kind of like
Yeah,
it's him starts off everything and then it kind of branches out. Yeah, that's cool. That's cool. What was it like hearing back every like you listen to people that you admire and they're playing your music. What was that like back hearing it back? It must have been a because it's your music, but when someone else does their vibe on it, you
yeah,
can sometimes you can appreciate when someone else plays something you've done, even though you've wrote it, because you can kind of distance yourself and you're not as critical.
yeah, yeah. I mean, hearing Robbie play on my stuff was one of those moments in life where you just can't quite believe what's happening.
Yeah,
Because and Eric Bibb, those two guys are such there's just such a lot of magic in their playing. There's their touch, their sense of melody. Tim I've worked with before, as I said, and when he plays on my music, I can't quite believe it because I grew up watching, Pink Floyd's Pulse concert over and over. And this guitarist that, in Learning to Fly or Another Brick in the Wall or Money takes these solos and almost plays David Gilmour off the stage. He's so good.
Yeah.
And that's Tim. Hearing Mike Smith, who plays on Blur records, and Blur are my all-time favorite band. Yeah, man. There's a lot of pinch me moments where you just can't quite, like, it's still weird even now. Now the album's been out for 6 months plus, and it's been finished for over a year. But I'm still kind of, when I got to talk to somebody like yourself and kind of go back over the story, it's still surprising to me that this has all come together the way it has. And working with Phil Brown on mixing the record and hearing the stories about the sessions for Laughing Stock and Spirit of Eden. And actually, there's, don't know how much I should say really, but I've heard things that hardly anyone else has heard. Not just story wise, but actual audio that, like, I shouldn't probably have heard, but the kind of outtakes and stuff, and
I get you.
it's been a dream come true and then some for me. So
Right.
I'm still the kind of sleeve note reading kid, who, if I spin this round, you can kind of see just this collection that goes on and on of
nice
music I've been buying since I was 11 years old. And a lot of these players have played on so many of these albums
that
I love so much. And it's really quite astonishing to me that this music geek has got to work with so many heroes. And I have to say, I'm if I can do it, anyone can. Right. I'm not anything special. I'm just like so many. I've got a little setup. I haven't got racks of expensive outboard. I haven't got, crazy amounts of money, anything like that.
Yeah.
So I've said this a few times in interviews. The whole project is a kind of testimony to the goodwill and the sort of the integrity of top world-class musicians who do it because they love music.
Do you think everyone might have played, when everyone's at lockdown, do you think that contributed to getting a lot of people?
Yeah, I would never pretend that, that had nothing to do with it, that it was all just because my demos were so genius that they just fell at my feet and said, thank you for bringing me this music. No, I think, people
not that I meant it. Not that I meant it in bad by that. I'm just saying.
No, it's fine. I do. I think people weren't out playing live. They were more available than they would have been. So yeah, I think that definitely contributed to it. But I never wanted to spin the story like, oh well, this is a lockdown record.
Yeah.
That's kind of tired already, isn't it?
Yeah. I get what you mean. But it must be cool to kind of have, now that you're kind of, once you get something off the ground that's getting recognition and stuff like that, it gives you kind of that ammunition to kind of go further with it. Do you know where you want to take it, or is this a
I do. I've got kind of several perverted ideas about extremely long form music.
Okay.
I love Morton Feldman as a composer. I don't know if you know.
Okay, yes, I do. Yeah.
Avant-garde.
Yes.
And he'll do pieces. John Cage as well. Do pieces that last hours and hours. And I kind of love. I call it endurance music in my head.
Right.
And I think we can ask. I think we should ask more of people in their listening, because everything's very immediate now. So streaming is kind of, you can have whatever you want almost immediately.
Yeah.
And I think part of the joy of music is certainly for me, is I like to have to work a little bit to get the payoff from something or to really get to know something.
Yeah.
But at the same time, that might be something over here. With Held by Trees, I definitely want there to be a lot of joy in the
Yeah.
music because I think sad music is there's too much. Well, no, there's not too much. There's not enough happy music. Put it that way.
Yeah, I get
Um,
you.
it's easy to do, especially as an Englishman. It's very easy to do melancholy because that's what we do well. That's Pink Floyd. That's the Beatles. That's Blur, Radiohead, Smiths. A sort of slightly resigned melancholy is the British way. I don't know what you think as an Irishman listening to British music, but
Ugh. I like any music as long as it's good. I don't mind. We're a bit melancholy here too, come on. Weather-wise.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
You
No,
got to listen to I don't know, have you ever heard, or I've said this to many people because I love this album so much, but you ever hear I Troll the Megahertz?
no,
I think you would love that record. Do you know Prefab Sprout?
yeah.
So the guy from Prefab Sprout, Petty McAloon, kind of after Prefab Sprout broke up, he started getting these hearing problems. So
Huh.
he couldn't hear the bass. So because he couldn't hear the bass, he kind of couldn't start sing properly. So he made this like neoclassical record. He put out as Paddy McAloon, and it kind of no one heard it. And then I think it got released a few years ago in the Prefab Sprout. But it's an amazing record. So he would take it's like classical music, like neoclassical music. You could even say like some of it could be Steve Reich-esque and stuff like
Oh
that.
yeah,
But
yeah,
he's taken like stuff from radio excerpts and like put it into songs, and it's just all. I think you'd like it. I think you'd actually
yeah.
really
That
like
sounds
it.
interesting.
It's very different. It's
Yeah,
very very different.
and you mentioned Steve Reich uh, and I mentioned Feldman and Cage, and I was in New York a few months ago, and I did some studio time over there, and I
Wow.
got a bunch of sort of drum machine and synth samples and rhythms and beats. I don't know whether that will come into Held by Trees music. But yeah, I definitely want uplifting, hopeful music. And I think the last track on Solace, the New Earth, is kind of pointing towards that.
Right.
And some of the stuff that's going to come out from the real world sessions is definitely really happy,
Oh, that's cool. I always like that
joyful.
though. When people, I know bands used to do that sometimes years ago. Their last track would be a point of what their next stuff would be
Mm,
like. I think that's a cool. It's
yeah,
like a continuation of what you're going to do.
yeah, and there's definitely an element of that. And I think but I love really quiet and I love really outrageously noisy. So I kind of like the extremes a lot.
Yeah.
There are people that I'd like to work with. Any of the Blur guys would be very welcome. But yeah, I mean, they're actually touring next year, so it's probably not going to be next year, but
Are you a
we'll
fan of
see. I'm
Think
in
Tank?
touch with them though.
Are you a fan of Think Tank? I think that's a great record.
I love Think Tank.
It's
Yeah,
amazing.
for me, they've not made a bad record. 13 is probably the one that I derive the most inspiration from.
Right.
Um, and there's elements of how they made 13 that's actually not too far apart from Talk Talk, actually.
Right. That's cool. So you're so
Quite.
you know the Blur guys.
I got to know Dave, the drummer, yeah,
Okay.
and I've
That's
got to
cool.
know. I zoomed with Graham, and I've met him a few times actually. Once I jammed with him.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Wow. That must be cool.
Um, I'm a bit of a fanboy with those guys, and actually Damon got the first copy. I got to meet him the day after our record was mastered, so I gave him a CDR of Solace. I don't know if you ever listened to it, to be honest.
Sweet man.
Alex is the one I haven't met, even though I share a birthday in a hometown with him. But yeah, I've got to know Dave the most. He's a lovely guy and really honest as well. Like he doesn't bullshit you. He tells you the
Yeah.
truth. Helped focus me a bit in the making of the record, and I saw him a few weeks ago, and he said, "Really enjoyed your record. I thought it would be a bit too close to Talk Pastiche, but it's far more interesting than that." So I took that. Took that. Yeah.
That's cool. I like oh, I'm terrible with names. What's the name of the song you have? Rain After Sun? That's fucking
Yeah.
sweet, man. I really like that. And that was the one I kind of got drawn to first. I was like, oh, that's a really like the sound of it is
Interesting.
beautiful. I think it's a really nice sound on it. The whole record sounds really beautiful. It's a really cool vibe to it. Like that, I was kind of similar. When I hear anything that's kind of similar to Talk Talk, I'm almost like, yeah, because I've heard so many kind of things that are Talk esque, but like
Yeah.
you're like So I was quite happy that it's I was it it's not like you can tell it's influenced by Talk Talk, but you're doing something in your own way. It's not completely, you know what I mean? Like, and there's Floyd
It's a relief
influences.
to hear you say that. Because and that's what reviewers, thankfully, I've been blown away by the response, and people have 99.9% of all the feedback that we've got has
Mm,
been what you're saying, that you can hear that DNA, but it does stand in its own right. And of course there's no singing on it, so I didn't I didn't even entertain the idea of putting any vocals on it. It's
right.
just, you can't feel that needed to be a space
I
there.
get you. I get you. That probably worked to its advantage as well, like that, because it's got that. It's a lot of like jazz records are just jazz. I like that's what I love about jazz. I like jazz singing on records, but I'm much more into just a jazz record because you can kind of get lost in it as well. Because sometimes the singing informs your thinking.
Yeah,
You
I
know,
agree with you.
we've about a minute left, so I'll ask you, where can people like find you and what are you up to and all that stuff that we have to put out to
Yeah,
find us?
thank you. Yeah, we are on Instagram. That's probably my favorite, at Held by Trees. Twitter at Held by Trees. Facebook at Held by Trees FB. YouTube at Held by Trees. We're going to be playing live in January, Cambridge, Manchester, Leeds, and then there's some more dates coming through. But follow us on socials and you'll get all the information for those.
Ex- Excellent, man. Hey, dude, thank you so much for doing this. I really appreciate it. And look forward to hearing the new stuff, man.
Thank you very much. Let's keep in touch.
Oh, brother, for sure, for sure. Hopefully, not too, whenever, if I ever get it to England again, I'll get catch you live. That'd be cool, man.
Yeah, I'd love to come to Ireland as well.
Well, if you ever do, let me know. We go for an whiskey.
Yeah, sounds great, man. Thank you
All
so
right,
much.
brother. I'll talk to you.
Yeah, you
See you,
will.
dude. See you,
All the
dude.
best.
You too.
Bye.
Bye, bro.